Have you ever found yourself slipping into a strange dream in the stillness of the night? A dream that feels like a gateway to the unknown, filled with cryptic symbols, overlapping timelines, and unexplainable omens. You become the seeker, wandering the edges of consciousness, where every familiar yet foreign detail seems to whisper ancient secrets. Is it your subconscious replaying memories of the past, or echoes of an ancient prophecy warning you about the future? Tonight, we embark on a journey through dreams and reality to uncover the hidden codes buried deep within, keys that connect the mind to the universe, fate to awakening. So let's dive into this realm of illusions and revelations together and uncover the hidden truths no one ever told you. Dreams have long been seen as hidden gateways to the mystical world. In ancient Egypt, the Book of the Dead describes how priests used dreams to communicate with the afterlife, revealing secrets of the deceased's next existence. In ancient Greece, dreams were considered whispers of divine prophecy, guiding heroes on their legendary journeys. Eastern traditions also assign extraordinary significance to dreams. Vedic scriptures and Buddhist Zen teachings describe the dreamlike nature of reality, viewing dreams as a path to self-discovery and spiritual purification. Medieval alchemists recorded dreams as mysterious symbols, believing they resonated with the subconscious and cosmic energy. They saw every dream as a reflection of nature's laws, an unspoken dialogue between humanity and hidden wisdom. Over time, this knowledge became buried within lost civilizations, obscured by power and superstition, leaving only a few enlightened seekers to uncover its secrets. Many ancient spiritual traditions also saw dreams as a trial ground for the soul, where people could confront their deepest fears and desires, leading to inner transformation. The symbols, landscapes, and visions within dreams resemble celestial codes, hinting at the universe's underlying order. This layered, symbolic interpretation of dreams later inspired countless mystics to re-examine the intricate connection between consciousness and reality. The fusion of history and philosophy casts an aura of mystery over dreams, pushing us to question, are we merely living in the surface reality of daily life, blind to the endless possibilities of the inner world? And as ancient wisdom meets modern science, could the hidden truths within our dreams finally be waiting to be uncovered? The world of dreams is far more mysterious and surreal than the reality we experience daily. Imagine wandering through a realm of shifting illusions, an ancient castle flickering under the moonlight, strange symbols floating in the air, every scene whispering cosmic secrets in an unknown language. Ancient sages believed that dreams weren't just random images produced by a resting brain, but a hidden gateway between the subconscious and the wisdom of the universe. Every detail, every symbol within a dream could hold the key to a future prophecy or an undiscovered truth within. In this secret world, symbolic imagery becomes the key to unlocking meaning. A shattered mirror in your dream might reflect inner conflict or fractured identity, while a winding river could symbolize the ever-changing flow of life. Greek philosophers once saw dreams as divine oracles, offering metaphorical insights into fate, while Zen teachings encourage us to observe the impermanence and illusions within dreams, helping us break free from attachments and find inner liberation. What's even more fascinating is the strange resonance between dreams and waking life. Sometimes, after experiencing a dream that feels eerily prophetic, you might notice similar patterns unfolding in reality. This synchronicity seems to echo the ancient wisdom. As above, so below. Dreams not only mirror our deepest fears and desires, but may also serve as messages from beyond time, subtle warnings or glimpses of pivotal moments yet to come. Ancient prophets and mystics often describe dreams in poetic language, seeing them as crucibles for spiritual awakening. They believed that only by learning to decode dream symbols could one truly unlock their hidden potential and glimpse future possibilities. Just as alchemists sought to transmute inner lead into gold through a process of inner refinement, dreams serve as a hidden ritual of self-purification and transformation. Every seemingly random dream is a whisper from the universe, a flicker of guidance amidst the chaos, waiting for you to recognize the light it offers. As we delve deeper into the mystery of dreams, we inevitably encounter a fascinating paradox. Dream imagery is often filled with contradictions and multiple layers of meaning. Many dismiss dreams as mere random brain activity, but ancient wisdom suggests that each dream is like a carefully crafted fable, concealing profound symbolism and hidden messages. Have you ever dreamt of a crumbling palace or an endless labyrinth? Such visions might signify the collapse of deep-seated beliefs or a sense of being lost in life. Yet they also hint at opportunities for rebirth and transformation. Modern psychologists, such as Carl Jung, viewed dreams as manifestations of the collective unconscious, a bridge between our minds and ancient wisdom. They propose that dream symbols are not arbitrary but rather universal archetypes that transcend time, linking ancient myths to modern experiences. For instance, if you dream of a phoenix slowly spreading its wings, it may symbolize an inner transformation or awakening. Such imagery doesn't just inspire self-discovery, it serves as a reminder that every choice holds the potential for a profound shift. At the same time, the cryptic symbols in dreams are often dismissed as mere superstition or hallucinations. But their true power lies in what they reveal. The future is not fixed, but continuously shaped by the emerging visions of the subconscious. Ancient civilizations used intricate dream symbols to decipher natural laws and cosmic forces, and these insights still resonate today. Dreams may appear contradictory on the surface, yet they weave together multidimensional messages, offering glimpses of both destiny and the boundless possibilities of free will. Furthermore, the narratives woven into dreams are deeply influenced by culture and historical context. Different civilizations have interpreted dreams in various ways. Some saw them as divine revelations, while others viewed them as reflections of internal struggles. This diversity of interpretation enriches our understanding of dreams, showing us that true dream analysis requires looking beyond surface-level symbols to uncover the unity hidden within apparent contradictions. Just as alchemists endured trials and transformation in their pursuit of inner gold, dreams serve as a path of self-purification and rebirth, revealing hidden strengths and potential futures within the depths of the psyche. These profound dream symbols are not just echoes of the past, but whispers of what's to come. They remind us that awareness and transformation are the keys to breaking through limitations and embracing the unknown. When you learn to listen to the secret whispers of your dreams, you'll realize that each one is telling you the same truth. The future is never predetermined. It is a miracle continuously created by your own wisdom and courage. How can we transform the hidden truths of dreams into real-life wisdom? The key lies in combining practice with deep self-awareness. First, start a dedicated dream journal. Each night, as soon as you wake up, make it a habit to record every detail of your dreams, the hazy images, strange symbols, and moments that made your heart race. Just as ancient sages carved secrets into stone tablets, your dream journal will become a crucial key to decoding the language of your subconscious. Next, try conscious dream meditation. Set aside a few minutes each day in a quiet space. Close your eyes and revisit your dreams, allowing yourself to fully immerse in them. As your meditation deepens, attempt to re-enter the dream's atmosphere, feeling the symbols and imagery whispering their meaning. This practice not only helps you tune into your inner voice, but also strengthens your ability to bridge the connection between dreams and reality, guiding your future choices. Additionally, explore the symbolic meaning of your dreams. Read books on dream interpretation, mysticism, and ancient wisdom to gain insight into how different cultures have understood dreams. Engage with others who share your interest in dream exploration. Discussing your experiences and interpretations can provide fresh perspectives and deeper clarity. Finally, don't just analyze your dreams. Apply their messages to your waking life. If a dream presents a powerful symbol, try translating it into action. Perhaps it's a sign from your subconscious urging you toward a long overdue change. Keep an open mind and embrace the process of exploring both confusion and revelation. You'll soon realize that even the smallest insights can spark profound transformation. Through these practices, you won't just uncover the mysteries of your dreams. You'll awaken a timeless wisdom that illuminates your everyday reality. Secrets within dreams are far more than fleeting nighttime illusions. They are a mystical gateway to the depths of your subconscious, revealing endless possibilities for the future. As we've explored today, every dream echoes ancient wisdom, serving as both a reflection of your inner world and a key to the unknown. Have you ever considered that each dream you experience might be quietly guiding you toward awakening? These hidden symbols and metaphors not only challenge our fixed perception of reality, but also remind us that the future is not set in stone. It is shaped by every choice we make. When you encounter those indescribable images in your dreams, take a moment to pause and truly listen to your inner voice. Dreams don't just show you the intersection of past and future, they offer inspiration for transformation. Just as an alchemist turns lead into gold, your dreams act as a secret ritual for inner change, urging you to step into your spiritual journey. Now, I have a question for you. What mysteries lie hidden in the depths of your most vivid dreams? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments, and let's uncover these forgotten truths together. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so more people can step into the mysterious world of dreams.